It was a brisk Monday morning in Washington, D.C., and all eyes were glued to one program, Capitol View Live, the nation's most-watched morning political broadcast. The show promised fireworks that day. The promo clip already had the internet ablaze. Karoline Leavitt, the no-nonsense White House press secretary under President Donald Trump, was scheduled for a live debate against Texas Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Known for her passionate progressive voice, tensions had been building for weeks. Crockett had recently gone viral for slamming the administration's new economic sanctions strategy, calling it corporate favoritism wrapped in patriotic jargon. Meanwhile, Leavitt had been making waves with unapologetic defenses of the Trump White House, skillfully dismantling hostile media narratives with cool precision and blistering facts. Now, these two political powerhouses were face-to-face. No cuts. No edits. Just truth, or at least their versions of it.as the show opened. Host Marcia Greer welcomed viewers with barely contained excitement. Ladies and gentlemen, buckle up. This is going to be one for the books. On the split screen, Karoline appeared sharp and composed, donning her signature navy blazer with the American flag pin. Her calm smile was disarming, as if she knew something no one else did. On the other side, Jasmine Crockett wore fire engine red, a visual metaphor for her intensity. Her eyebrows were already furrowed, her lips slightly pursed. Marcia started with a neutral question. Let's talk about the administration's latest tariffs and their impact on working-class Americans. Jasmine didn't hold back. Let's be honest, she began, waving her hand dismissively. This administration is playing a shell game. They're taxing imports and pretending it's good for the average American. But it's not billionaires who feel those prices at the grocery store. It's single mothers, veterans, and small business owners. Karoline smiled, almost amused. Respectfully, Congresswoman, she said, that's a beautiful soundbite, but completely false. You're ignoring basic economic realities. When President Trump authorized this round of tariffs, it wasn't to tax the American people. It was to restructure a decades-long imbalance where foreign nations exploited our markets, our workers, and our goodwill. Jasmine scoffed. You can dress it up however you want, Karoline. But the facts don't lie. Prices are up. Wages aren't keeping up. People are hurting. Marcia leaned in. Karoline, do you have data to support your claim? That's when it happened. With the confidence of a seasoned prosecutor, Karoline reached off-screen and pulled out a binder labeled Unfiltered Trade Data, Internal Briefing. She flipped it open and held up a chart. This right here is from the Department of Commerce, dated just last Friday. You'll see that since the tariffs were imposed, American steel production is up 22%. Small manufacturing in the Midwest is up 14%. You know what that translates to? Jobs. Real jobs. Union jobs. Paychecks that were gone under the previous administration are back now. Jasmine leaned forward, her expression shifting slightly. Where did that data come from? She asked cautiously. Straight from the Office of Economic Strategy. Verified and peer-reviewed. I'll gladly email it to your office. The studio went silent. Karoline didn't stop there. And while we're on the subject of hurting Americans, can we talk about your voting record, Congresswoman? You voted against the Small Business Relief Act that helped over 300,000 minority-owned businesses keep their doors open during the economic slump. Want to explain that? The audience in the studio gasped. Jasmine blinked. That bill was riddled with pork and handouts to Trump donors. Karoline raised an eyebrow. So you admit the politics mattered more than helping actual Americans? The atmosphere grew electric. Twitter exploded. Hashtag Leavitt versus Crockett began trending worldwide within minutes. Marcia struggled to keep the peace. Let's take a break. No need, Karoline interjected, her voice cold steel. We're just getting started. As the cameras rolled back in after the commercial break, the atmosphere inside the Capitol View Live studio was like a courtroom seconds before a verdict. Twitter was in a frenzy, hashtags trending and live stream chat rooms igniting with fiery opinions. Everyone knew something had just shifted, and Karoline Leavitt was nowhere near finished. Host Marcia Greer, clearly aware she had a ratings jackpot on her hands, attempted to steer the conversation back into civil territory, but Karoline had other plans. Before we move on, Karoline said, gently tapping her binder again, I think it's important for the American people to see who's really looking out for them. She flipped to another page and pulled out a photocopy of a congressional appropriation letter. This, Congresswoman Crockett, is your signature on a letter lobbying for increased federal funding to a private tech firm in Austin, Texas, Stargrid Analytics, a company whose board includes your own campaign's former finance chair. Want to explain that? Jasmine blinked, her body language suddenly stiffer. That funding was for a rural broadband expansion project, which never happened, Karoline interrupted coolly, not raising her voice. Not a single household got broadband. But Stargrid? They walked away with $7.4 million in federal grants. And 3 months later, your campaign received a $250,000 donation from a PAC linked directly to their CEO. The audience gasped audibly this time. Marcia jumped in. Karoline, are you alleging corruption? I'm not alleging anything. I'm stating facts with receipts. Unlike the narratives constantly hurled at this administration, what I'm sharing is backed by federal reports, donation records, and official grant tracking data from the Government Accountability Office. Jasmine's voice trembled slightly. You're trying to smear my name with incomplete information. That PAC supports dozens of progressive candidates, then perhaps it's just coincidence that your campaign was the only one that received max contributions the very same week that contract was finalized. Karoline slid a USB flash drive across the table. Everything's on there, Marcia. Emails, contracts, transaction logs. All available through public record, just conveniently ignored by most of the mainstream media. Marcia Greer was visibly shocked now. She took the USB and turned to Jasmine. Congresswoman Crockett, would you like to respond? Crockett's face was flushed. She had always prided herself on being the voice of accountability and justice. To be caught off guard, live on television with evidence in hand, it was political disaster. This is political theater, she said, her tone defensive now. This administration has been desperate to distract from its failures. If you want to talk about scandals, let's talk about January 6th. Karoline leaned forward. We've addressed January 6th. The president condemned it multiple times. People were prosecuted. But you still haven't explained why a tech firm that delivered nothing was rewarded with taxpayer dollars and why your campaign benefited right after. The control room cut to a wide shot, and for the first time, viewers across America saw something they rarely did. Jasmine Crockett speechless. Marcia attempted to move forward. Let's shift topics, perhaps immigration, but Karoline wasn't done yet. We'll get to immigration. But I want viewers to know this is the kind of accountability the Trump administration represents now. We're not playing defense anymore. We're coming with facts. And it's about time someone challenged the performative politics in Congress with real transparency. Backstage, producers were whispering frantically. The segment was originally slated for 10 minutes. It was now stretching past 20, and viewership was skyrocketing. Across the country, people tuned in from offices, cafes, and schools. Conservative pundits erupted with praise, while even some moderate voices began to wonder if Karoline had just pulled off the political equivalent of a mic drop. Crockett, visibly rattled, leaned into the microphone. I'm proud of my record. I fight for my constituents every day. But if Karoline wants to play opposition researcher, maybe she should explain why this administration slashed funding to renewable energy while pushing oil profits through the roof. Karoline smiled. Glad you brought that up. Let's talk energy next. Karoline flipped to the next section of her now infamous binder. Without missing a beat, she pulled out a fresh stack of charts and graphs, each laminated and labeled with color-coded tabs. The woman had clearly come to this debate prepared for war. Let's talk about energy, Congresswoman, Karoline said with that same infuriatingly calm tone. You claim this administration is harming America by prioritizing traditional energy sources. But let's look at what actually happened. She held up a chart titled U.S. Energy Independence Index 2020-2025. Under the Biden administration, we saw America's energy independence plummet. We became net importers of oil again. Gas prices shot past $6 a gallon in several states. Meanwhile, our strategic reserves were drained to record lows. She pointed to another graph. Now, under President Trump's second term, the U.S. is once again a net exporter of oil and natural gas. Domestic production has surged. The average price at the pump is down 43% from its peak in 2023. And you know who that benefits? Working-class Americans who drive to work every day, not Wall Street executives. Jasmine shook her head, trying to reclaim the narrative. Those are cherry-picked statistics. And you know as well as I do the climate crisis. The climate crisis is real, Karoline cut in. But it doesn't give you a license to bankrupt the American worker in the name of ideology. This administration is pursuing an all-of-the-above energy policy. Clean coal, renewables, and nuclear included. What your side wants is an overnight revolution that our infrastructure can't handle. Then came another bombshell. Karoline pulled out what appeared to be a printed email exchange between a congressional aide and a renewable energy lobbyist. This, she said, holding it up, is an email between one of your senior aides and the vice president of Helio Wind Corp, dated just 2 weeks before you publicly endorsed their federal funding proposal. In it, your office requests strategic assistance for digital ad campaigns targeting swing districts. That's not just unethical. That borders on quid pro quo. The room temperature seemed to drop. Are you accusing me of pay for play? Jasmine snapped, anger finally bubbling over. I don't have to accuse. The evidence speaks for itself. Marcia jumped in, visibly uncomfortable but unable to stop what had become a runaway train of revelations. Congresswoman Crockett, have you seen these emails before? Jasmine looked visibly cornered. I have no knowledge of those communications, she muttered, her tone clipped. Would you be willing to call for an investigation into your own office's dealings with Helio Wind Corp? Karoline pressed. Silence. I'd need to review everything first. Karoline didn't say a word. She just held her stare, and the silence that followed said everything. Viewers across the country were watching a rare political unraveling, and it was happening in real time. Meanwhile, the internet was exploding. Headlines began flashing across news outlets and social media feeds. Leavitt brings receipts, leaves Crockett stunned. Fox News, Jasmine Crockett left floundering in explosive TV showdown. The Daily Wire, Karoline Leavitt's binder of doom. Every page a scandal? Trending on X, progressive silent as Crockett fails to defend allegations. The Blaze, even moderate outlets couldn't ignore the magnitude of what had just happened. Back on set, Karoline closed her binder with a finality that resonated far beyond the studio walls. The American people deserve more than finger-pointing and performative outrage. They deserve answers. And for once, they're getting them. Jasmine Crockett sat motionless, lips tight, eyes fixed on the desk before her. It was clear. Karoline hadn't just come for a debate. She came for a reckoning. The show was now running over its scheduled time, but producers weren't about to pull the plug. Every network wanted to carry the next moment live, and even rival stations began cutting into their programming to show the unfolding drama. Marcia Greer glanced at the teleprompter, then ignored it. We're staying with this segment a little longer, she announced. The audience deserves to see this through. Karoline sat confidently, her binder now resting on the table like a closed case file in a courtroom. Jasmine Crockett, on the other hand, looked like someone trying to find solid ground in an earthquake. But Karoline wasn't gloating. She wasn't smirking or celebrating. Her demeanor remained focused, intent on showing the American people that this wasn't about revenge or political games. It was about truth. Let me say something very clearly, she said, addressing the camera directly now. This isn't personal. I have nothing against Congresswoman Crockett as a person. I respect that she fought to be where she is. But when elected officials use their power for personal gain, hide behind buzzwords, and deflect with distractions, it's the American people who lose. That line hit like thunder. The camera cut to Jasmine, who finally raised her eyes, only to see the screen behind her. Now flashing visuals of the email records, grant inconsistencies, and conflicting statements Karoline had revealed. Jasmine exhaled, then turned to Karoline. You've made your point, she said, voice taut. But let's not pretend this administration is squeaky clean. Let's talk about the president himself, about Trump's tax returns, about his past statements about January 6th. It was the last card in Jasmine's hand, an attempt to regain moral ground. But Karoline didn't flinch. We've talked about all of that extensively, she replied. But while your party obsesses over the past, we're fixing the present. The American people don't care about 4-year-old tweets. They care about groceries they can afford, gas that doesn't break the bank, jobs that return from overseas, and borders that are secure. A new image popped up on the screen, a side-by-side of grocery bills from 2021 and 2025. Eggs, milk, bread, chicken. One bill was nearly double. Let's talk about families in El Paso who saw 800 migrants cross the border in one night. Let's talk about Detroit factory workers rehired after their plant was reopened thanks to President Trump's new tariff deals. Let's talk about Chicago parents who finally got school choice under this administration's education reforms. She leaned in slightly. But what we're not going to do is hide behind old narratives while current policies fail to serve the people. The audience, previously quiet with tension, erupted into applause. The noise was deafening. Even some of the production crew backstage were nodding. This was no longer a debate. It had turned into a political awakening. Jasmine Crockett attempted one more rebuttal, but her voice was shaky. This isn't fair. You come with preloaded documents and frame a narrative. Where's the balance in that? You had the same opportunity to prepare, Karoline replied, her tone never rising. But preparation comes with accountability, and accountability is what this moment demands. The host tried to wrap the conversation again. We're going to go to one final question, but Karoline cut in once more, this time turning to Jasmine one last time. I'll leave you with this. Congresswoman, if everything I've said tonight is inaccurate, prove it wrong. I'll gladly come back for another debate. But if even half of what I laid out is true, then it's time to stop pointing fingers at the Trump administration and start answering to the voters who trusted you. That was it. The audience rose in a standing ovation, something rare for a live political debate. The moment was iconic and everyone knew it. It would be replayed for weeks, months, maybe years. Backstage, political strategists scrambled to assess the damage. Jasmine's team immediately went into crisis mode. Meanwhile, Karoline's team celebrated. But she didn't linger. She gave a respectful nod to Marcia, glanced once more at Jasmine, and quietly exited the set. The moment had spoken for itself. On the streets of D.C., New York, Dallas, and Phoenix, Americans discussed the debate in real time. It wasn't just a victory for Karoline. It was a turning point for the tone of politics under Trump's second presidency. And Jasmine Crockett? She sat in silence, mic still on, staring at the desk with the weight of the truth finally settling in. The next morning, America woke up to a political landscape forever altered. News stations replayed the debate like it was a championship game. Clips of Karoline's binder drop, her one-liners, her statistics, and Jasmine Crockett's stunned silence were everywhere. From morning news panels to viral TikToks. Fox News branded the moment. The night Karoline Leavitt made Washington blush. Even CNN, usually critical of the Trump administration, ran a segment titled, "When Receipts Speak Louder Than Rhetoric." On Capitol Hill, the ripple effects were immediate. Reporters swarmed Jasmine's office for comment. Her team issued a brief statement. Congresswoman Crockett remains committed to transparency and will cooperate fully with any inquiry into her office's interactions with third-party organizations. But the damage had been done. Several members of Congress distanced themselves quietly. Her progressive allies, once vocal on social media, fell strangely silent. Meanwhile, inside the White House, President Donald Trump reportedly watched the full debate over breakfast. According to staffers, he leaned back in his chair after it ended, grinned, and said, "That's why I picked her." Karoline, however, wasn't basking in fame. She returned to the West Wing and got right back to work. Her press team fielded thousands of interview requests, but she turned most of them down. When asked by a reporter outside the White House how she felt after taking down Jasmine Crockett, Karoline simply replied, "It's not about taking someone down. It's about lifting the truth up." Still, her moment had gone viral. Her inbox flooded with thank you messages, from truck drivers in Ohio, nurses in rural Missouri, farmers in Nebraska, and small business owners in Nevada. One message read, "Thank you, Karoline. For the first time in years, I felt like someone in Washington actually spoke for me. No spin, no games, just the truth." Back in Texas, Jasmine Crockett held a private meeting with her core team. Some were urging damage control. Others advised a public apology. But Jasmine wasn't ready to concede anything. "I'm not finished," she told them. "She came after me on national TV. I'll fight back." Yet no matter how hard she tried, the narrative had moved on. The country had witnessed something rare. A political spokesperson armed not with spin, but with substance, not with insults, but with irrefutable facts. The days that followed saw a massive boost in Karoline's national approval ratings. Conservative media dubbed her America's Iron Press Secretary. Even some centrists applauded her poise and preparation, comparing her to a modern-day Deborah. Bold, strategic, and unafraid. There were even whispers. Could Karoline Leavitt one day run for office herself? A seat in Congress? Maybe even a governor's race? When asked about it in a rare sit-down with Newsmax, Karoline responded with a smile. Right now, I serve at the pleasure of the president. I have no future ambitions beyond helping this administration deliver results for the American people. That's my job, and I intend to do it with everything I've got. As the interview closed, the host turned serious. Karoline, what would you say to young women watching last night's debate, who saw you take on the political establishment and come out on top? Karoline paused, then said something that would be quoted in articles and campaign speeches for years to come. I'd say this: do your homework, tell the truth, and never apologize for being prepared. In a world that values volume, be the voice of reason. It will echo louder than any scream. And just like that, the legend grew. Karoline Leavitt didn't just survive live TV. She reshaped the rules of political engagement. And Jasmine Crockett, she faded for now. But in American politics, redemption stories were always one election cycle away. Still, everyone knew the truth. That night on live TV, the facts were loud, the evidence louder, and Karoline Leavitt was the loudest voice of all.